Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today I'm going to talk about this beauty right here. This is the HL8 from 45Drives, a brand I haven't spoken about that much on the channel at all, but if you've met me outside of this channel, you know I've spoken about them a lot. I've made recommendations for 45Drive storinators and HL series devices to lots of users, big and small, particularly those in the creative field, but as the market for solutions, let's be honest, made in America, or at least a lot closer to America than others, has become quite desirable, it has to be said that 45Drives has seen something of a boom. And today, not only do I want to talk about the HL8, I want to talk about this brand, where they are in the market right now, and whether they deserve your data. But before I go any further, quick disclaimer. 45Drives isn't paying for this video. They're not sponsoring this video. They've supplied me a unit that's already got a motherboard, CPU and memory combo inside for today's review. This isn't, by the way, going to be the first video. There's also going to be some comparison videos. It's the name of my website. But I would say with this device right now, what we need to talk about is 45Drives themselves first, because they are one of those brands that come under the heading, if you know, you know. Because 45Drives is weirdly not a brand that everyone has heard of. In the US, I would argue they have, and particularly those that like to use open source software, or, you know, the likes of TrueNAS or semi-open source stuff like Unraid, they'll probably be a lot more familiar with them. They are towing that line between DIY and turnkey NAS, because this is a solution that you can purchase either as just the enclosure or pre-built, pre-burnt-in, and that spans across the majority of their portfolio of large-scale storinator rack mount solutions, and also some of their desktop solutions in the HomeLab or HL series. With the HomeLab stuff, it's a lot stricter, the configurations you can get pre-built, but as you make your way up through the higher echelons of their portfolio, when you start tippy-toeing out of stick it in the basket orders into request a quote, the diverse nature of the CPUs and the configurations of those systems actually get pretty darn wild. For the HL8, you can get this starting out at around $650, and that goes up to about $1,500 if you get the pre-made model. Now, we'll take that pricing apart in a little while, but for now, I'm going to talk about that turnkey element, because this does arrive with a server management platform known as Houston UI. It's actually built on top of a Linux one known as Cockpit Project. Completely open source. It allows you to manage the server pretty easily, and 45Drives has integrated a few other kind of, I would say, UX improvements that are dedicated to their own spin on it, implement some of the ZFS features, as well as a lot of the integrations that are very specific to the build, and some graphical implementation as well that apply to just their devices once it's deployed within them. But again, it's not comparable to something like Synology DSM. I would say it lives, and I'll mention this more later on, between something like TrueNAS or Open Media Vault there. It has the design element. It kind of feels like a WordPress website, if I'm honest. But all of the control is there. But a lot of the control is still command line based, CL. And although the 45Drive implementations and UX improvements definitely make it easier, and things like virtual machine deployment, user management for the most part, and the file management internally is all done via the GUI of Houston. Still, there's a lot of command line control that we'll touch on later on that you're going to need to know how to do to make the most of it. Now, one of the main reasons 45Drives is so well known in the US, but less so anywhere else, is because although they are based primarily in Nova Scotia, Canada, they also have a production facility in combination with a company called ProtoCase based in Wilmington in the US. Now, there's a lot of discussion right now about, let's say the word together, tariffs, and getting solutions that are solely constructed and delivered from the East is potentially going to be very expensive for some people. Now, I'm not going to say that the HL8 that I've got here on the table right now is solely built out of Canada and the US. This one isn't, because inside we have got numerous components, because this is the pre-built model, the full burn-in, that has components inside from Gigabyte, from Noctua, and some of these components come from Taiwan, come from China. So it's worth keeping in mind that going for some of the pre-built options, you're not going to be getting something that is exclusively built in Canada, or at least the components were created in exclusively US or Canada. But I will counter that with, one, the majority of the components we use these days do still come out of China and Taiwan. But more importantly, it's the actual chassis design that we really have to talk about. So let's start positive. This is hands down the best MITX 8-bay desktop NAS case I've ever seen. Hands down. Better than Johnspo, better than Fractal Node. I would say this does an incredible job of facilitating cooling, facilitating active and passive thermal control, and on top of that, it looks bloody easy on the eye. That hinge design is exquisite. On top of that, I will love any desktop server that not only doesn't involve me removing some top panel that never fits back in properly, but moreover, I'm able to perform real-time troubleshooting on this, one, without removing these drives. I haven't got to pivot the system around. Two, accessing cleaning and maintenance on the fans is done again with almost no movement of the main storage area. And lastly, accessing the motherboard is not hidden behind the drives. It's not tucked behind the PSU. It is completely and utterly parallel to the rest of the system. Indeed, you can run the system like this wide open if you want to do real-time troubleshooting to see if some components are doing what they're supposed to. Also, the documentation the system arrives with and proof and detailing on a lot of the burn testing that they've done with this is A1. Again, I know this is a system that has been sent to me for review, but I will say this is a system comparable to all the images I've seen online from other people's reviews, and it is just A1 in terms of presentation. I've never seen anything like it. That unique design, by the way, extends right the way down to unique deployment for you as well. You can get different material colors, a different finish on the front, as well as a complete different laser design on the front if you choose to. So all of these things add up to, once again, the HL8 alongside the majority of other 45Drive systems being phenomenally unique in their design. Unfortunately, phenomenal unique design don't come cheap. And this is a case that is constructed exclusively in Canada and the US. And again, the whole production line is done in-house, right the way down to documentaries that they've released on their own YouTube channel, showing full build from a sheet of metal right the way down to the finished product. But if you try and go for this system with just the SATA backplane and the casing itself, nothing else, no PSU, you're looking at $650 without tax, which goes, by the way, over $200 more if you want the one with an 80 gold rated 500 watt flex SFX PSU included as well. So again, that is where a lot of users, particularly in the more value focused, look at something like the HL8 or some of the other solutions in the 45Drive portfolio. And because it's a solution that once again is straddling the DIY community, for those users, it seems phenomenally expensive for what you're getting when they compare it against cheaper options they can get from China. A lot of people at the other end of the spectrum that were going to go for something like this, that they want pre-made and then they can go for their own MOBO, but want to buy, you know, in-country support local, that doesn't seem as expensive. But let's talk about that price tag a little bit more and drill into it. We do need to talk a lot more, though, of course, about value for money. A lot of users in, an existing financial climate being what it is in 2025 are going to wonder about that price point or, the pain point for many of you when considering a 45Drive solution. Now, obviously, we're talking about the HL8 in this video, and we could talk about the broader range of solutions from the brand, and I invite you to definitely give that a go on their own website. But if we drill down into just the HL8, I want to talk about what they're charging, what you can get in the market, similarly in terms of hardware and what it will cost you, and what you are gaining and losing overall. So, for example, the fully built solution we've got here is $1,538. Now, bearing in mind there are a lot of extras that come along the way. We've got the chassis included with that. You've got CPU choices there, which will increase the price. Same goes with memory and storage. There's add-ons, but we're not really going to talk about those today with these other optional add-ons. And we could talk also about the cost of the chassis on its own, the included backplate, and of course the full built and burn in there in the background with the OS drive being included with Houston on board. So let's work with that fully built solution there. If we have a look, just to kind of not bury the lead, I've managed to find not dissimilar hardware to this across 13 different components for $882. And I'm going to go through my workings in a moment. But again, we are talking about 50% of the price, give or take, compared to buying just this singular solution. Obviously, that is a single vendor, all built in-house, a single warranty guarantee solution as well, something we need to talk about. But let's drill into how exactly I achieved that number. The same CPU, that 8-core 16-thread processor and motherboard can be purchased as a combo for, again, it's on offer right now, but about $260. The same memory, up to 64 gig, you can get for about $103. Then you've got the SSD included there. I've got 1 terabyte there at $61. And again, we're going to include that deal price because $50 to $60 for a terabyte at Gen 3 is pretty standard. So at Gen 4, that's still pretty darn good too. Then we've got the same CPU there, 500 watt Flex 80 Gold Plus. Then we've got Nocturne fans, both variations of it, by the way. So we've got the two front panel fans, and we've got a secondary one there. And of course, we've got the fan that's on top of the PSU as well. Then when it came to the casing, there's actually a lot of variety when it comes to 8-bay MITX cases in the wild. I was looking at Fractal Node as well, that's an MITX. I ended up settling after going through different case options. I went for the cheapest option just to show you rock bottom pricing. And so I added the lowest price one here, $159. And again, all of these allow for support of 8 bays of storage. They all include the backplane for the drives, and they all include support of that same Flex PSU and a PCIe upgrade slot. Then we need an adapter for the 6 bays of storage because there's only 2 ports on that motherboard that we're looking at here at the beginning. And then after that, I was looking at standard SATA cabling, 8 individual there, so 2 packs of 4. And then there was the CPU cooler as well. And I didn't really include thermal paste or any of the screws and bells and whistles. But that is how, in the end, after buying all of these components, I ended up reaching a price point there of $882. Now, things to keep in mind. Number one, 13 items. So even if we're generous and say things like cables, we're never going to pursue the warranty, that is still 7 to 8 different brand warranties and support structures that we have to deal with. Maybe if we use something like Amazon, some of that will come under the heading of Amazon being the vendor, but still nonetheless, technical RM8, that sort of thing, that is lots of different headaches there. Additionally, these are all different deliveries. Some of these have got their own delivery costs. Again, things like Prime will mediate that as well. But then you have to construct it yourself. That goes in, by the way, if you have a fault, if you have to do troubleshooting, where it will come under. And although this is, again, $882 versus $1,538, it is worth remembering that a lot of the time you're paying for that convenience, but also you're paying for that locality. Now, whether you want to put a price on buying local, that really comes down to you and what you're looking for. And I do think 45Drives are making it clear that the internals there, that motherboard, the CPU they're utilizing there isn't in-house, it's that gigabyte one. But really breaking down that price differential is really going to come down to you, the end user, what you consider your time and energy are worth. I don't think 45Drives are going to find it easier to bring that price down anymore. Realistically, the casing is made in-house, the construction in-house, the burn-in in-house. So at that point, when we talk about the price differential, I'm not going to say it's justified, because I think that's going to come down to you, the end user, how much you're prepared to pay and how much you think it's worth. But I would say for what they are including, or once you factor in the whole in-house nature, that price starts to make a lot more sense. Now, very soon I'm going to be comparing this device, the HL8 here, the pre-built 1500 nickel solution, against the DS1825 Plus from Synology and the QNAP TVS H874, because these are similarly priced options in the market. Judging this based on that pre-built configuration is going to be difficult, because one of the criticisms I will definitely say for 45 Drives about this, when they are offering people pre-tailored solutions, I understand they don't want to really span the globe in terms of the configuration option to the end user and the buyer there, when frankly a lot of users are only buying this for those incredibly unique cases that they roll out. They include the pre-built, pre-burnt solutions, because some people want to go that extra step further. And therefore, if they want to have 100 different SKUs, that is going to be really difficult to profile and indeed support down the road. So I get why they would have limited configurations for the pre-built, pre-burnt solution options for you. But that said, this hardware configuration, that AMD processor I'm in love with, I would say, but definitely the fact that this system arrives with a single 2.5 gig port, there must have been better options in the market. There must have been, you know, whether it was Gigabyte or other parties out there, MITX motherboards with more than one 2.5 gig option in there. If you are watching this 45 Drives, and I assume you are, I would say I would maybe look into changing, or at least offering an alternate option for an MITX that has more than one network port. You have the PCIe, so adding an additional NIC or two in there, 10G or whatever, is going to be easy. But I do think at 1500, I do expect to have more than 2.5G on one port. But also, because I know that the majority of users look at the HL8 and just want it for its casing, giving you performance testing, at least of this, might not be the reason you came to this video. That's why I'm going to include a lot more of that performance testing of the power consumption when I do the QNAP and Synology comparisons. But one universal we can all agree is if this device was being utilized with any configuration, how much noise is it going to make? There's only going to be the odd variable of the fans you use that make a difference. But I will say that this system, when I had it running in idle, it only hit around 33 to 34 dBi. Let's hear that now. Whereas when I ran the fans up to maximum and was creating a ZFS pool, the noise, although higher, only really hit around 42 dBA overall. Again, I have to at least acknowledge that the Noctua fans inside throughout, right the way down to the CPU fan as well, certainly played their part. But overall, for a system that has technically 4 active cooling fans dotted all the way around it, and the overall casing being metal all the way around, I'm really impressed with the dBA. Now, as mentioned, Houston UI is built using the Cockpit Project open source server management platform here. It's built using Linux, as you can see there at the top. And later on, we will be talking about some of the specific 45 Drives areas of this. But we're just going to, as a quick praisey of this platform, I will say it is somewhere between, for me, TrueNAS and Open Media Vault in terms of its presentation. Pretty much all of the configuration you're going to need is here. Whether it is that you want to manage the system and have a little look and a quick glance just what is going on with the system and some of the more design-led elements that 45 Drives have introduced, pretty much everything you're ever going to need is here. It's not perfect. I will say there's some of the elements with regards to some of the bells and whistles that aren't included, something we're going to need to talk about later on when we start talking about some of the help and guides later on in order to make the most of this platform, but still nonetheless, the controls are there if you take the extra few minutes to find them. Now, as we're using the default AMD build for this from 45 Drives, we've only got the one NIC, but I'm sure if we added ourselves a PCIe, we'd be able to do some more with those individual connections there. Storage management, although it's a lot more text-based than it is graphical, once we dig into, say for example, 45 Drives ZFS management portal, we're able to create ourselves a ZFS pool very, very quickly, so we can just call that whatever we want. Oh, it needs to have letters. we can go ahead and create that very easily. Select the drives that we want to use. Again, we've got partitions on these already. It's alerting me. We can say what kind of identification we want for it, as well as the RAID configuration, all the way down to RAID triple parity if we choose. We can even add a VDEV if we choose with the additional drive, but from there we can just proceed forward, reselecting those drives. And again, this we can do right the way down to the sector side, the record size, and whether you want to introduce deduplication, whether you want expandability with the additional drives, how you want that to be handled, and furthermore, whether you want to add encryption if you choose. Again, it's that straightforward, and it's very easy to set up. And this is what I mean about 45Drives building on top of what's already present there in the Cockpit project UI, because it's all kind of a lot more graphical. To put that into perspective, we leave that and go into the individual disks. We can see the disks bays that are on here and real-time information about them. I wish I could right-click, but unfortunately no. Same thing goes if you want to break down into the hardware here. They're introducing graphical capability here with regards to the Mobo because it's the one they've installed. But I don't quite know how big this database is for other motherboards. I'd have to check into that, how much of this is Cockpit and how much of it's 45Drives. The lines are a little blurred. Again, I wish I'd right-click contextuals, or if I double-click, that it would open up into the hardware specifications. But you can still dig into a text-based breakdown of the system as it is right now. Now, managing storage and services, we've already looked into the storage services and creating those ZFS pools, but when it comes to the individual services that are active on the system, to say it's modular would be an understatement in the highest degree. Practically every single key element of this server grade control is manageable and switchable. Again, you should know what you're doing, and I think, arguably there are going to be users that would rather use the command line for stuff like this, so they know they can be very precise about what's going on, but still, this is somewhere in the middle where you can have that element of control, but it's still presented to you in a browser GUI, but I wouldn't play with this if you don't know what you're doing. Also, when it comes to storage, there is a file folder breadcrumb manager built in, but you can't really do anything. There's no executables, there's no viewing images very easily or playing audio files and stuff like that. There's elements of that, I'd say. And of course, right-clicking gives you the contextual options if you want them, as well as the ability to be able to edit access if you choose, as well as creating new shares, new areas there all the way through, and creating those sharing areas if you choose to, as well as uploading directly from your local machine. But still, it's still quite primitive in terms of its file folder management when you look at things like Synology or QNAP, or even Asustor and TerraMaster DSM, QTS, ADM, and TOS file managers in the web browser. That said, file sharing and protocol is pretty detailed, and again, how much you want to configure is pretty straightforward and up to you. Adding other features and services, there's not really any kind of app center there to add on extra stuff, which I know is probably going to annoy some users who are just looking for a simple life right now. Virtual machine management is pretty darn good. I'd say the virtual machine manager is exactly what you want it to be, finding a line between setting up a virtual environment very easily with hand-holdy stuff such as downloading existing images and creating tailored operating system environments for that virtual machine. But still, nonetheless, things like Docker, things like containerized applications in an app center are seemingly absent here. And that's something I think even TrueNAS users in scale have kind of grown used to now. And it's weird that it's not here in 2025, even in this operating system built on Cockpit. That said, there is still some standalone and in some cases very unique features to this platform that I genuinely like. For example, the modularity of the software updates, I can definitely get behind that. On top of that, this internal benchmarking tool that you can utilize to kind of test your internal performance, benchmark, throughput, call it what you will, quite easily is something that in most other NAS systems is solely dedicated to testing these storage drives individually. There's very few instances of being able to set this up straight out of the box with such ease. Likewise, if you go to the task scheduler I like the fact that managing a lot of your backups very easily here, be they cloud-based backups, SMB or remote rsync backups there, or customized tasks are done really easily. And once you really dig in, such as cloud synchronization, it's handled really well in a single pane of glass, when most other turnkey NAS solutions that provide cloud synchronization and cloud backup generally have a wizard and multi-screen process that, although for some users might be more user-friendly, I would argue when it comes to cloud synchronization, where you don't want to accidentally oversaturate one of your storage buckets, having it in this single one view configuration screen is going to be really appealing, at least as far as I'm concerned. And that breaks down, by the way, all the way down to other tasks as well. It's not unique to just that one. It configures and changes to each one of these tasks, even with specialized ones. But of course, that's when we're making our way back into the command line. That said, there's still room for improvement, and one of the areas of that, I would say, is to do with multi-factor authentication, something I consider a standard in 2025. Now, to put that into perspective, you create a new user, it's real straightforward, create a password, you can lock out the account anytime you choose to, and indeed, there is a whole overview, by the way, for individual users. If you choose with identities, you can manage an existing user and kill all of their access at a moment if you choose to, be it general access or straight into the individual terminal sessions, changing password rules and more, as well as individual passwords for some of those remote access protocol. But do you know what's missing here? Two-factor authentication. Now, that isn't to say that you can't add it if you make your way into the knowledge base, where they cover a lot of information with regards to not only standalone instances and application services in Cockpit, but also some of the Houston UI stuff. But something like adding two-factor authentication, that shouldn't be behind the command line. And indeed, it's so arguably complicated that they even Houston themselves had to roll out their own video showing you how to do it. And I don't want to have to spend nearly 2 minutes going through creating two-factor authentication on command line when practically every other platform has multi-factor authentication built into the GUI very easily. Things like creating air gaps where the system or individual ports can be powered on or off at certain periods of the day to minimize attack threats when, less hands are on deck. Yes, you can go into the custom task area and almost certainly create a command line in order to do that, but a lot of other NAS service platforms right now, where NAS management allows you to do that in the GUI very easily. And again, in 2025, I'm just kind of surprised that is not on here yet. I guess the big takeaway here is that Houston UI and of course Cockpit itself is a fully customizable and extremely flexible platform there. We've not even talked about some of the integration of things like Ceph, and talking about high availability and just how easy that is to pan out because of this storage profiling, and of course some of the hard-baked stuff that's already in the background of Cockpit there. But it's still not quite as feature-rich as something like TrueNAS. But that's the point. You don't have to use just this software. This is included if you want it. It's downloadable if you want it. This is optional. And if you want to go for a 45Drive solution, you're not locked in on just this platform. You can look at Unraid, look at TrueNAS. And with that in mind, that's when you have to reframe how you're looking at this sometimes. Yes, it's complicated. Yes, it is a growing platform compared to some of the more established ones out there, but you're not locked in. And that's kind of the whole raison d'etre of the HL8 and other 45Drive products. Bottom line, there is a reason why 45Drives continues to be the darling of the DIY HomeLab environment, and although Houston UI ain't perfect, it is the point that it's not the end of the road for you, and you can choose if you wish to pursue other software options on this system, and they'll support you along the way. If you choose to use TrueNAS or Unraid on this and you go for the pre-built solution and you have hardware problems, they'll support you. If you want to use some of their knowledge bases and guides for things like TrueNAS, it's rolled in there. And unlike some of the DIY solutions we talked about, which by the way are definitely still going to cost you less, keep in mind you're still going to have to construct the device. You're still going to have 7, 8 or more different warranties. And although that isn't to say that that isn't still a good option over there, it is worth highlighting that this does provide a suitable third option for those that were either going to look at building from the ground up on their own or going pure turnkey with something like a Synology or a QNAP. This is an emerging middle ground line of pre-built NAS solutions in the middle on one level or another that are either OS free or include an operating system that you can choose to use or not. Nevertheless, there is room for improvement. I am a desktop NAS lover, and I'll tell you right now, they could really stand to improve upon their range of pre-built desktop NAS solutions. The cases are A1, whether it is the 4-bay or this beautiful 8-bay or some of the bigger ones, some of those hybrid ones as well, or the Storinator. But the desktop stuff like this needs to have better configuration options. And although the CPU they've chose to go for is all right, the TDP is a little higher than I'd like compared to other embedded Ryzons, I will say single 2.5G on the rear, underwhelming in the extreme, and they need to provide some better options there alongside that. Also, as good as Houston UI is and as customizable as it can be, it's still not going to be as widespread understood or utilized as TrueNAS, something I think the majority of users that buy the pre-built solution from 45Drives end up using, and I'm surprised they've never really had some sort of agreement with that company. They're based in the US, and unlike dealing with turnkey NAS solutions like DSM with Synology or QTS with QNAP, they have got a nice little middle ground. Perhaps it's TrueNAS and, of course, IX Systems with their own pre-built solutions that's limiting the potential for that collaboration. But I do wish that it's something that could be engaged with both of these platforms. Nevertheless, the HL8 knows what it is, knows who it wants as its user, and I think it's succeeding in that format. If you are looking for a budget solution or your money is tight, realistically, this isn't going to be a solution for you. They know that, and I think you know that as well. But if you're someone that values your time or wants to shop local, or at the very least wants to get a very solid, uniquely built solution with a proven track record, this is hard to argue with right now. But stay tuned for comparison videos coming very, very soon. And also perhaps another video where we really break down into the price of other devices in the 45Drives lineup and just how much it would cost to build those, both in terms of the resources and the components, but also the time to put them together. But thank you so much for watching. There is a link in the description to take you to 45Drives store in order to get hold of this or other devices for yourself. I invite you to use it. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.